On June 25, 2009, the world stopped. Michael Jackson was gone. News channels froze. Fans collapsed. History changed overnight. But what if his story didn't end that day? What if it actually began 30 days earlier in silence, exhaustion, and warning signs no one wanted to see? Asterisk, in early 2009, the world heard the words it had been waiting for. Michael Jackson was coming back. The announcement of this is it hit like an earthquake. After years of silence, rumors, and courtrooms, the king of pop was returning to the stage. Not for one night, not for a short tour, but for 50 sold-out shows at London's O2 Arena. To fans, it felt like hope. To the media, it was a resurrection. Headlines screamed that Michael was back where he belonged. But behind the excitement, the reality was far less glamorous. The comeback wasn't just about music, it was about survival. Years of legal battles, cancelled projects, and broken contracts had left Michael under enormous financial pressure. The tour was designed to fix everything at Onestead's reputation and legacy. Failure wasn't an option. The message around him was clear. The king must return. Publicly, Michael smiled. He waved to cameras, spoke softly about loving his fans, and promised magic. But privately, the schedule was brutal. Rehearsals stretched late into the night. Expectations were impossible. At an age when most performers slowed down, Michael was being asked to deliver the most demanding shows of his career again and again. Without pause, the media sold a fantasy, a triumphant legend reclaiming his throne. Few questioned whether his body could handle it. Fewer asked whether he should. This comeback was built on hope but also on pressure, denial, and urgency. It ignored warning signs in favor of spectacle. What the world celebrated as a return was, in reality, a countdown already in motion. The stage lights were coming back on, but the cost of that light was far darker than anyone realized as the countdown quietly began. Those closest to Michael Jackson noticed changes that were impossible to ignore. He was losing weight. His frame, once powerful and athletic, appeared fragile. Clothes hung loosely on his body. During rehearsals, he often looked smaller, thinner, almost hollowed out. To the public, these details were hidden behind carefully chosen outfits and controlled appearances. But backstage, the concern was growing. Insiders later described a man whose body was struggling to keep up. Michael complained of constant exhaustion. Simple movements took more effort than they should have. At times, his hands trembled. His voice, still beautiful, carried signs of strain. Yet every time someone asked if he was okay, he gave the same answer: "I'm fine." Sleep was the biggest problem, or rather, the lack of it. Michael suffered from severe insomnia. Nights passed without rest, leaving him drained before rehearsals even began. While others slept, he remained awake, anxious, restless, trapped inside his own thoughts. Without proper sleep, his body had no chance to recover. Publicly, none of this showed. Cameras captured smiles, soft-spoken interviews, and gentle waves to fans. He reassured the world that he felt strong and excited. Fans wanted to believe him. The industry needed to believe him. And so, the warning signs were brushed aside. This was the dangerous balance of Michael's final month. A body sending clear distress signals, and a world choosing denial. Concern existed, but it stayed quiet. Questions were asked, but rarely pushed. Everyone hoped he would somehow push through, the way he always had before. But the truth was simple and terrifying. Michael Jackson's body was already running on empty, and with 30 days left, there was no time to refill what had been lost. As the days moved closer to opening night, rehearsals for this as it became relentless. What was supposed to be preparation slowly turned into punishment. Michael often rehearsed late into the night, sometimes into the early morning hours. Long after the crew was visibly exhausted, the music would still be playing, the lights still on. There was no consistent routine, no real recovery time. One night would end at midnight, another at 2 a.m. Sleep, when it came at all, was broken and short. His body never had the chance to reset. Each rehearsal took more than it gave back. Witnesses later described moments where Michael appeared confused or physically unsteady. He would stop suddenly, bend forward, or ask for breaks that came too late. Yet the schedule didn't slow down. There were dancers to train, visuals to perfect, cues to memorize. The show had to be flawless because the world expected nothing less than perfection from him. This wasn't the Michael of his prime years, performing with limitless energy. This was a man pushing himself beyond safe limits, driven by pressure rather than strength. Instead of building endurance, the rehearsals were stripping it away. Instead of restoring confidence, they were deepening exhaustion. And still, he kept going. Every pause was followed by another attempt. Every sign of weakness was ignored or explained away. The team around him focused on the production, not the cost. Canceling or delaying felt unthinkable. Too much money, too much reputation, too many expectations were at stake. He wasn't preparing his body, he was draining it. What should have been a careful, protective process became a countdown, fueled by denial. With each late-night rehearsal, Michael's reserves dropped lower, and no amount of talent, discipline, or willpower could replace what his body was losing. The stage was nearly ready, but the man meant to stand on it was fading fast. Behind the rehearsals, the lights and the promises of a perfect comeback, another reality was quietly unfolding. Michael Jackson was in constant physical pain and even greater mental distress. Years of injuries, surgeries, and extreme stress had taken a toll on his body. But the most dangerous struggle wasn't visible on stage. It happened late at night, away from cameras. Painkillers became part of his routine. Not for recreation, not for escape, but to function, to move, to rehearse, to survive the demands placed on him. Over time, sleep became almost impossible without medical help. Insomnia tightened its grip. Night after night, when exhaustion met anxiety, rest no longer came naturally. Doctors were brought in to help him sleep. What started as temporary relief slowly became dependence. Michael wasn't chasing a high, he was chasing rest. A few hours of peace. A moment where his mind could finally shut down. But the more he relied on medical solutions, the further he drifted from natural recovery. Those around him later described a heartbreaking pattern. A man desperate for sleep, afraid of the night, terrified of lying awake alone with his thoughts. The drugs didn't fix the problem. They only delayed it, and each delay came with a cost. This wasn't addiction born from recklessness. It was dependence born from pressure, fear, and isolation. Michael was trapped between unbearable exhaustion and impossible expectations. The show had to go on, and his body was no longer cooperating. No one slowed the machine down. No one pulled him away from the edge. Behind the curtain, the king of pop wasn't being protected, he was being managed. And with every passing day, the line between help and harm grew thinner. It was tragic. It was silent. And it was already too late to pretend everything was under control. Michael Jackson was never truly alone during his final month. He was surrounded by people, crew members, backup dancers, assistants, technicians, and many of them saw the warning signs. The problem wasn't that no one noticed, it was that no one felt powerful enough to stop what was happening. During rehearsals, some dancers watched Michael struggle to keep pace. They saw moments where his energy dropped suddenly, where his focus drifted, where his movements lacked the sharpness they once had. This wasn't the unstoppable performer they had grown up idolizing. This was someone fighting his own body. Crew members noticed it too. Missed cues, long pauses, requests for breaks that came more frequently. Quiet conversations spread backstage. Is he okay? Does he look too thin? Should we slow this down? But those questions rarely made it past whispers. Assistants saw even more. They watched him arrive exhausted. They saw how fragile he looked up close. They knew about the sleepless nights. But speaking up carried risk. This was Michael Jackson, a global icon. Questioning the process felt like questioning the entire production and the people financing it. There was fear. Fear of being replaced. Fear of losing a once-in-a-lifetime job. Fear of being labeled disloyal. And so, concern stayed quiet. In an industry built on hierarchy, responsibility becomes blurry. Everyone assumes someone else will intervene. A doctor, a manager, a director. But that intervention never came. The system moved forward, even as the man at its center weakened. This silence wasn't cruelty. It was hesitation. It was pressure. It was the dangerous belief that things would somehow work out on their own. People noticed the warning signs. They talked about them quietly, but no one stopped the machine. And in that silence, the countdown continued unchallenged, unstoppable, and closing in fast. As his physical strength faded, Michael Jackson's mental world grew smaller and quieter. Fame had surrounded him with people for decades. Yet in his final month, loneliness became one of his closest companions. Real connection was rare, trust was fragile, and isolation settled in deeply. Michael had lived most of his life under a microscope. From childhood, his world was shaped by pressure, discipline, and constant judgment. The stage gave him love, but it also took away privacy, safety, and a normal sense of self. In moments of stress, old wounds resurfaced. Childhood trauma didn't disappear with success. It weighted those close to him, described a man who struggled to trust intentions. He questioned who was there for him and who was there for the show. Contracts, schedules, and expectations replaced genuine care. Even when surrounded by staff, he felt emotionally alone. Insomnia made everything worse. Without sleep, thoughts became heavier. Anxiety grew louder. Nights stretched endlessly, giving his mind space to replay fears, doubts, and memories he could never fully escape. The pressure to perform wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Michael wanted to please everyone. Fans, promoters, the world. But that need came at a cost. Saying no felt impossible. Slowing down felt like failure. He carried the weight of being a symbol, not just a person. This is where fame shows its darkest side. It amplifies success, but it also magnifies vulnerability. Michael Jackson was one of the most famous humans on earth, and yet, emotionally, he was profoundly alone. Mental health doesn't disappear under bright lights. It doesn't bow to applause or record sales. And in Michael's final weeks, the isolation he felt quietly deepened the crisis around him. The world saw a legend preparing to return. Inside, a human being was struggling to hold himself together without the protection people assume fame provides. In the final rehearsals, something felt different. The energy in the room shifted. What should have been excitement carried an eerie weight, like everyone was standing inside a moment they didn't yet understand. Cameras rolled, capturing footage meant to celebrate a triumphant return. Instead, they preserved something far more haunting. Michael moved with focus, but not ease. His timing was precise, yet his body looked fragile. Between songs, he spoke softly, conserving energy. Then came the line that would echo forever. "This is it." At the time, it sounded like confidence, a declaration that this comeback mattered, that these shows would define everything. But in hindsight, the words landed differently, almost like a farewell no one recognized. The final rehearsal footage shows flashes of the legend the world loved, sharp movements, musical genius, command of the stage, but it also reveals pauses that linger too long, a thin frame under heavy clothing, a performer pushing through moments that should have signaled stopped. Those who were there later described the atmosphere as emotional, even unsettling. Michael thanked the crew. He spoke about love, unity, and taking care of each other. His tone was calm, reflective, less like someone preparing for a tour, and more like someone closing a chapter. Foreshadowing doesn't announce itself loudly. It hides in small details. A look held too long. A sentence that feels heavier than intended. A moment where silence says more than words. In those last rehearsals, the world was watching a legend prepare for greatness. What it didn't realize was that it was witnessing goodbye captured in high definition, hidden in plain sight. The lights were ready. The music was perfect, but the man at the center was already slipping away. One quiet moment at a time in the final 72 hours of Michael Jackson's life. Exhaustion reached a breaking point. By this stage, sleep had become almost impossible. Night after night, his body was present, but rest never truly came. Insomnia wasn't just a condition anymore, it was a crisis. Those around him noticed the urgency. Michael spoke openly about his inability to sleep, expressing fear of the night itself. Without rest, his strength continued to fade. Every hour awake made the next day harder. His body was running on empty, and his mind was trapped in a cycle of anxiety and desperation. Conversations during these final days were quiet and serious. Michael asked for reassurance. He spoke about the upcoming shows, about wanting to be strong enough to perform, about not wanting to let anyone down. There was no talk of quitting, no talk of slowing the schedule, only concern about whether he would be able to make it through. Despite how fragile he was, plans continued as if everything were normal. Meetings were held. Logistics were discussed. The machine around him kept moving forward, even as he struggled to keep up. There was no dramatic farewell, no grand final speech, just small, human moments, a tired voice, a worried question, a request for rest. These were the last conversations of a man who had spent his life giving everything to the world. The final 72 hours weren't chaotic. They were quiet, heavy, filled with unspoken fear, and that is what makes them so devastating. Michael Jackson didn't lose his life in a moment of noise or spectacle. He faded during a period of silence, exhaustion, and unmet need. By the time help truly mattered, his body had already reached its limit. The countdown was nearly over. The morning of June 25, 2009, began in silence. Inside the Los Angeles home where Michael Jackson was staying, there was no music, no movement, just a stillness that felt wrong. When those around him realized something was seriously wrong, panic replaced routine. An emergency call was placed. Time suddenly mattered more than anything else. Paramedics arrived and tried to bring him back. Efforts continued as he was rushed to the hospital. Outside, nothing had changed yet. The city moved as usual. People went about their day, unaware that history was about to shift. Then the news broke. Within minutes, reports spread across television screens, radios, and the internet. Confusion came first. Contradictory headlines, hope mixed with fear. Fans refused to believe it. Some waited for confirmation. Others prayed it wasn't true, and then it was confirmed. Michael Jackson was gone. The reaction was immediate and global. Crowds gathered outside hospitals and landmarks. Fans cried openly in the streets. Radio stations stopped regular programming. Music videos played on endless loops. The world collectively froze, trying to understand how someone so iconic could suddenly disappear. Disbelief followed shock. How could the king of pop be gone at 50? He was supposed to return, supposed to stand on stage again, was supposed to rewrite the ending. Instead, the music stopped. For many, it felt personal. Michael wasn't just an artist, he was a soundtrack to childhoods, memories, and moments of joy. Losing him felt like losing a part of time itself. June 25, 2009 became more than a date. It became a dividing line before and after. The countdown that began 30 days earlier had reached its end, and the world would never sound the same again. In the days that followed June 25, 2009, the world struggled to process the loss. Memorials formed organically outside his home, at concert venues, in city squares across continents. Fans left flowers, letters, gloves, candles. Many couldn't speak. Others played his music on repeat. As if sound could fill the silence he left behind, the official memorial service became a global event. Millions watched as artists, friends, and family said goodbye. Stories of kindness surfaced, regret surfaced too. People asked the same question in different ways. How did this happen? And just as often, could it have been prevented? Investigations followed. Timelines were reconstructed. Decisions were examined. Responsibility was debated. But beyond legal outcomes, a deeper discomfort remained. Michael Jackson did not die in isolation from the system around him. He died within an industry that rewards perfection, ignores exhaustion, and confuses productivity with care. The unanswered questions lingered because they weren't only about Michael. They were about how fame treats the human beings it elevates, how pressure replaces protection, how silence becomes normal when success is at stake. Yet, Michael's legacy did not disappear with him. His music continued to play. His influence continued to shape artists. His art outlived the circumstances that ended his life. That contrast, timeless work and a fragile final chapter made the story even more painful. The last 30 days of Michael Jackson's life weren't defined by scandal or spectacle. They were defined by warning signs, missed chances, and a pace that never slowed. This isn't just the story of a death. It's a reminder. Fame does not equal safety. Applause does not replace rest. And even legends need protection, because behind the title King of Pop was a human being asking for time the world never gave him. In the days after Michael Jackson's death, the reaction from fans was immediate and overwhelming. Across the world, people gathered in silence and in tears. Outside hospitals, homes, and landmarks, crowds formed with candles, handwritten letters, and flowers. For many, it felt unreal. Michael Jackson wasn't just a celebrity, he was part of their lives, their childhoods, their memories. Losing him felt deeply personal. The memorial service became a global moment of collective grief. Millions watched as artists, family members, and friends spoke through tears. Stories of his kindness, his generosity, and his passion for music filled the air. His songs played not as entertainment, but as farewell. The world wasn't just mourning an artist, it was mourning an era. And then came the questions. How did this happen to someone so famous, so protected, so surrounded by professionals? Could the warning signs have been taken serious? Could the schedule have been slowed? Could someone have said stop loud enough to be heard? These questions never fully went away because they point to something larger than one life. Michael's death exposed a system that often values performance over well-being, where exhaustion is normalized, where silence feels safer than speaking up, where success becomes a shield that hides suffering. Yet Michael Jackson's legacy remains untouchable. His music continues to inspire generations. His influence lives on in every artist who dances, sings, or dreams bigger because of him. The art survived even when the artist didn't. And that is the warning his story leaves behind. For future artists, fame must never replace care. Pressure must never outweigh health, and comebacks should never come at the cost of a life. Because behind every legend is a human being. No spotlight is worth losing them. This is not a conspiracy. This is not about blame or hate. And this is not sensationalism. This is a human story, a tragic countdown that happened quietly. Behind the lights and applause, a silent collapse shaped by pressure, exhaustion, and missed chances to slow down. Michael Jackson didn't fall because of mystery or myth. He faded because the world kept moving while he needed rest. And that truth matters because it reminds us that even legends are human, and no amount of fame can replace care, protection, and time.